Do you ever avoid painting backgrounds because they seem intimidating? Or maybe you're worried that you're going to ruin the rest of your painting once you've added the background? You're not alone. Welcome to Sunlit Brushstrokes. My name is Jessica, and today I'm going to be sharing with you a simple way to paint the background first. I'll share some simple tips for success, and then stay tuned because next time we'll be adding this beautiful poppy. If you would like to follow along step by step, you can find the outline for this video in my Etsy shop. Let's go ahead and get started. Now, the first thing that's really helpful when you go to paint a background is to have your paper taped down. I know sometimes I don't always tape my projects down, but when you're doing a background, you're going to be applying a lot of water, and so it will ripple your paper. And you're going to want to have something to kind of either stretch the paper. Stretching is a great option, but if you're doing something simple and fast, easy, what I'm hoping to do today, I'm just going to use tape and tape it down to this board here. And that's all I'm going to do. It's going to help. It's not going to prevent rippling completely, but it will help. The second thing that can make a huge difference when you're painting a background is to actually go ahead and mask your painting. And by that I mean I'm going to put a little bit of masking fluid around the perimeter of this flower, and it's going to make painting the background just that bit easier. So I have some masking fluid here in this little container. I just pour a little bit into the lid, and then I've got a cheap brush here. You're not going to want to use one of your good brushes for this because it can damage the bristles. Once you've got your brush, you're going to want to put a little bit of soapy water or soap right on the bristles. That's going to help protect them. And then you're going to go ahead and just use your masking fluid and apply that around the edge of your flower. You don't have to mask the whole thing. You just want to go kind of around the edges. This is going to help you maintain any of the little ruffles or bumps that you see here. Especially if you're going to do more than one layer for the background, which is what we're going to do today. We're going to paint this background with a couple of layers, and it's when you go to do the second layer it can be more challenging to get it lined up perfectly with your first layer, and so that's where putting some of this masking fluid around the outside will help. And you can definitely try and make sure you get a little bit of that little bumping and a little bit of ruffles that you can see on this poppy here. Next time I'm planning to paint all these little stamen, and I could wait and do all the masking fluid for that next time, but you know what? Since I have my masking fluid out, I'm just going to go ahead and already kind of start thinking about my next stage of the painting, which will come next time. But I'm going to come in here and just do some little dots around the edge of here. Kind of this is the area where my stamen are going to be. I'm not going to fill the whole thing. I'm just going to do a couple of these little tiny, like I say, they're dots. They have like kind of a little bit of an oval look to them, just the ends of these little stamen things. So I'm going to actually, to make it easier to get into some smaller shapes, I'm going to take a toothpick here, and I'm actually going to use that and just draw in some of these tiny little stamen, just to kind of catch that little bit where the pollen is. Really what I'm trying to catch is where they come out into the flower, right? So it's like there's a lot of that peachy color around them, and then you kind of get this, just this tiny little speck of yellow. That's what I'm really trying to preserve when I do this. So I'm not copying the reference photo completely. I'm just kind of coming around and more or less dropping some of these in just so that I maintain some of my light areas in my final layer. So or I should say not my final layer, but my flower layer. So you'll see how this comes together in the next painting. And you can definitely wait and do this part later, but because I've got my masking fluid out, I'm just going to do this. Once I've got that on there, I'm going to let everything dry, and then I will come back and we'll work on the background. While our masking fluid is drying, let's take a minute to discuss our colors. I do have some colors mixed up here, but I'll just explain to you what I have going here. So I have taken some of my Hansa Yellow Deep, which is here, and I've put it in the center well along with some quinacridone rose. So I'm just going to go ahead and make a little bit more, or stretch the color that I have, because I want to have some really nice intense orange going here. So like I say, taking a little bit more yellow and mixing it into my orange, and then a little bit more red, because I want to make sure that I have enough of it and that it's concentrated. So just go ahead and mix some of the red in here as well, and then let's just test it. It's a nice deep orangey color. And I've got a couple greens that I've made using mostly Hansa Yellow Deep and Phthalo Blue. So I'll just quickly show you how I'm going to just stretch this green a little bit using what I've already got in my palette. So I'm putting a little more Hansa Yellow in here. This is Hansa Yellow Deep. Then I'll throw some of the Phthalo Blue. You can see I'm getting it a little bit more a slightly deeper green, but if I want to neutralize that green or get it more of an olive green, I just take a little tiny bit of my quinacridone rose and I mix it in there, and it kind of neutralizes it and gives us kind of a slightly more olive green. So it's a light green still, but it's kind of a limey olive. So something like that. And then a dark olivey green, or if you want it to not even be olive green, you're going to do the exact same thing. You're going to use Hansa Yellow Deep along with Phthalo Blue, but you're going to use a little bit more of the blue and a little bit more of the red in comparison to the yellow from what we did over here. So you can see I've got the yellow in there. And once again, I go into my Phthalo Blue. And we're getting a nice, more like a dark, intense green. And then again, neutralize it by putting a little bit of our quinacridone rose. And then we kind of have an olivey, a dark olive green, which is kind of, I think, what I want for this painting. That's a quite olive color. If you want it a little bit less dull, you can just use more of the blue and the yellow. So I'll just put a little bit more blue. Probably still have enough yellow in there because this is just a dark color. Ooh, that's quite a bit of blue. And you can decide if you like that green better, or if you wanted a little bit more on the olive side, you can just use more of the rose. You'll get us more olive. So just know that. You can make your greens with blue and yellow, but if you want to make them a little bit more, more to the olive side, just throw a little bit more of your red in there. So this is kind of a nice in between. So I think I'll go with this. So it's just a matter of playing with it, but you can definitely use a pre-mixed green as well. And then finally, I do have some purple here. This purple happens to be made with Phthalo Blue, and this here is quinacridone magenta. You could make your purple with quinacridone rose if you don't have the magenta, but I do like the magenta color there, and because I have this purple in my palette, I'm going to go with it. But you can make whatever purple you would like. And we're not going to use very much purple in the background. We'll bring our poppy into the camera now, and you definitely want this to be dry. You can tell mine is dry because it's such a dark, deep yellow color now, the masking fluid. That's what you want. You want it to be dry. And then to paint the background, we want to think about our colors from light to dark. So I'm just going to take my color wheel and show you what I mean by that. The yellow here is our lightest color. It's at the top of the color wheel. And when we want to color in or paint in our background, we're going to want to work from the lightest colors towards the darker colors. So in this case, we are going to be kind of working from the yellow into those oranges. And then we can work from the yellow from the light, like from yellow to light green and then into dark green. And finally, we can just add a final tiny bit of purple if we want to kind of get things just in the few spots so we kind of see that purple tone. And I'll show you when we get there. Really, we're focusing mostly on our oranges. And one thing we want to also keep in mind is not to massage anything that's got red and green together. That's where the mud will happen. You could do this in 2 layers. I'm going to try it in 1 layer, but if you struggle with making mud, you may want to do all your oranges first, let it dry, and then do all your greens. We're just going to give this a go and see how it works out. So I'm using a wide brush to wet the background here. You could use a larger round brush as well. You don't need to use a flat. This one just fills the area in really quickly. And I don't have to pay as much attention to my details right now because I have put masking fluid around the entire flower. That's especially helpful, the masking fluid is, if you're going to do more than 1 layer in the background. So if I decide, you know what, I want to do all my oranges first and then come and do all my greens as a second layer, really helpful to have that masking fluid there. You can do it without, but it makes it harder to get everything lined up perfectly between the 2 layers. So now that I've filled that in, I'm going to start with my lightest color. As I said, I do see some yellowy colors. They're a little bit orange yellow, but I'm going to drop some yellows in here. So I see yellows over here, and wow, that's intense, but it will get a little bit more dull. The paint will as it's drying, or not dull, but just it fades out. It's not going to be quite as intense. So we'll see how this goes. I'm going to put a little bit of yellow on this side, and then we'll be coming in with the orange right away. I know this looks crazy yellow compared to what you see in the photo. But don't worry, we're coming in with our oranges right away. So drop a little bit over here, and this is where I can see I didn't go quite up to the edge of that. So let's just take my time. I do have a rather large brush right now. This is my Artegeria round number 12. It's wide. You don't need to have such a large brush to do this. You can definitely work with a smaller brush if you want. The bigger brush can help you kind of stay loose, but it can also make it, depending when you're trying to be careful, as you come up to these little shapes. Even though we have masking fluid, you might feel better having a slightly smaller brush. So you can do what's comfortable for you. So I'm just dropping in my oranges where I see them, which is pretty much everywhere in the background here. And definitely I'm seeing a lot over here. So I'm gonna just really, really drop that orange in. And let's see, maybe we'll come down here and drop a little bit more down here as well. I see some. I'm kind of looking at the reference photo. You can kind of create designs that you're most happy with. You don't have to copy what you see. And I'm coming in, I'm taking just some straight quinacridone rose. I'm dropping that in a few spots where I feel like it gets more red. And just working that way. So I'm just kind of, as you can see, I went from yellow to orange to red, just the same way things would kind of land in the color wheel. And I'm almost happy with these colors, I think. They, like I say, they will get a little bit duller as things dry. I'm thinking I might do a little bit of, just wash my brush here, just massage the colors a little bit so my brush is a little bit cleaner. But that yellow, I do want it to fade into the oranges a little bit more. As you can see, that made a difference, right? So just doing a little bit of massaging here between the colors. I don't want to go too crazy and lose my color. So you just have to kind of find that fine line of like blending with your wet brush, and if you overblend, you'll lose some of the color there, but I think I'm happier with this blended look. So I'm almost good with that. I think I could almost come in, we could at this stage let all these bright colors dry, then come in with those green colors. But I think we probably, if we're really careful, this is where you just want to be aware that once you have these colors that all go together, right? You can massage these as much as you want and you'll still stay in the orange range. Once you put green in there, you know that the green also has blue. So we've got two primaries on here so far, yellow and red, just different combinations of those two primaries, right? Take my color wheel, yellow and red. Everything's kind of within this range. Once we go into the greens, that means we're introducing blue, and that will make mud if we're not careful. So that's where you need to be careful as you start working these greeny colors into here. So that's just a good rule to keep in mind, is that when you start to throw that third primary color, whatever it is in your situation, that like with whatever painting you're doing with today, it's obviously the blue. Just want to be careful. You don't over massage that color into the other colors. So let's just drop it, and we're being more careful as we come up to the orange that it can mingle, but don't overwork it. So just fill this in with green and do a little bit over here. I like the green that I'm seeing over here. And again, when I come up with closer to these orangey colors, you can see that's going to go muddy. You just have to keep that in mind. You can create a little mud. You just have to know that's what it's going to do. Don't want to overwork that color. And if you're not liking the mud, you just have to stop. And that is where you could do a second layer, like I say, let all those orange colors dry 100%, then do a green layer after. And that will help somewhat prevent the mud colors from happening. I'm not minding a little bit of that down here just because I don't mind a bit of that neutral. So I'm still using my light green, but I'm going to be coming in right away here with the dark green and just dropping that in a few places as well. Ooh, it's really, really quite dark. Again, I put a little bit here. Trying to make those decisions on how much of the muddiness I want it to have going over here, because I know when I drop that green in, that is what's going to happen, especially when the green and the red touch. The green and the yellow are fine to touch together. So keep that in mind. If you want to have more green coming up and you don't want mud, just do it where there's yellow. See, like that? That works. You could even do a little bit here if you want it. You can't really see that in the photo, whereas over here, you're going to get mud. And so that's just something to keep in mind as well. The green will go fine in your yellow areas. It's just the reds and the greens that really, they're opposite of each other on the color wheel. They will neutralize each other, cancel each other out. And then this is where I can decide if I want to put a little bit of purple. That purple might work okay in this area that I've got a little bit muddy. Put a little bit of purple in here. You can kind of see that bud back there. I'll probably put a little red on top of it. That purple seems a bit overpowering. And just a tiny bit up here. Just really careful with that purple. Again, the purple has blue in it. It can make mud when it interacts with your yellows. So just keep that in mind. You just want to be careful when you come in with these extra colors. Any of the colors that have blue. So purple and green. And I'm not worrying about making that a bud shape. I just kind of like the color there. I'm just going to soak up a little excess paint. It's off on the tape, so there's not really any need for it to be there, right? And actually, I might even put a tiny bit more orange in here. I'm seeing it quite red, so I might drop a tiny bit. You have to be careful as things continue drying. Things are just a little touch drier on mine. You have to be careful because this is where you can get kind of some funny blooms and things happening, so just be aware. And yes, when I drop orange near this purple, it will get a little muddy, and I know that, so just have to be careful. Do I want to put a little bit of green up here? I'm not sure. Maybe we'll just stick with the yellow so we don't get as much mud. Just put a little more purple here, I think, too. Okay, I feel like it's kind of starting to hit a funny stage where I'm going to get blooms if I'm not careful with the amount of water here because it's starting to dry. So I'm thinking I have to call it good, let it dry, and then I can always do another layer if I'm really not happy, but definitely I have to kind of stop working this one, I think. So let's let this dry and then I'll be back. If you're enjoying today's video and you want to take your artwork to the next level, you'll want to check out these 2 watercolor rose tutorials. When you purchase either of them during the summer months, you'll have access to some live sessions over Zoom with me, where you can receive support, community, and connection on your watercolor journey. You can ask your most burning questions, and if you would like, you can even get feedback on your work. If that sounds like something you would enjoy, you can find links for those in my Etsy shop in the description below. Now let's get back to painting. Once you've dried that layer, if you feel like areas of this painting or areas of your background could be more bold or more dull, more intense, whatever you would like to do with it, you can do another layer by just repeating those same steps. So going over the whole thing first with water and then dropping in more color. And that's totally up to you based on how dark or how you want your background. There was a few things I didn't like about my background, and so that's why I'm going to come in here, just repeat what I did. I kind of think that I got some splotching a little bit with that reddish color, and so I'm just going over everything, and I'm actually not minding if the colors even mush a little bit together. You can see as I'm dragging my paint around, I'm bringing a little bit of that red into my green, and I don't mind that look. I don't mind a little bit of neutralized green at the bottom of my painting, but that's kind of a personal preference. I'm not minding to have a little bit of that happening. So I'm just going to completely cover my background with water, go over everything once again, just doing the exact same steps. We'll start with the yellows, and I feel like overall I'm mostly happy with my yellows, but I could push them a little bit more over here, and I could push them a little bit up here. Again, you do not have to copy the reference photo at face value, but I'm changing it a little bit. I don't want quite as much yellow down here. And yes, you can see I'm a little bit muddy at the moment. Again, I don't mind a bit of muddiness towards the bottom of my painting here because I don't mind a bit of a neutral green. Then I'll just drop a little bit more of my oranges in this area. And a little bit over in here. So I'll just speed the video up as I do this because I'm going to just be repeating the exact same thing. I'm going to be going with my yellows, then towards my oranges, finally towards my reds, just a little bit, and then into the greens and purples. And at this stage of the painting, if there's parts of it you like just as it is, you can just put clear water on top of them. You don't even have to add a second coat of paint. So I'm just kind of going back and forth between all my colors, and in some cases I decided I was okay with neutralizing things a little bit and getting a little bit of a muddy look, and so you'll see that there are times I'm actually letting that orange and green kind of mingle, and I'm getting kind of like a really dull green, and you know what, I don't mind that. I think it actually kind of helps push the background into the background a little bit, but that can be your call. If you want your colors to remain vibrant, you're going to want to make sure that you don't let that orange or red mix with your green. I'm happy with how this background turned out, and I'm looking forward to painting the poppy with you, so definitely stay tuned, make sure you subscribe, and turn on your notifications so that you know when part 2 is ready. In the meantime, I hope this tutorial has brought a little taste of God's beauty and peace into your everyday life, and that it's inspired you to continue enjoying your own creative journey. See you again soon. Bye!